So we're going to go ahead and review factoring for one more day before we start solving degree 2 polynomial equations. And what we need to review today is when we need to factor quadratics when a is greater than 0. So there's a couple different scenarios that we need to be able to deal with when we factor, especially when a is greater than 0. So remember, when I talk about a, I'm talking about the a from standard form of ax squared plus bx plus c. This coefficient of x squared is what a represents. So if you look at example 1, part a, we have 2y squared plus 10y minus 168. So right away, I notice that there is a common factor with all three of these terms. I have 2, 10, and 168. All three of those numbers are even, so I know that 2 goes into them. So we have a GCF, or a greatest common factor of 2, between all three of these terms. So let's go ahead and factor out that 2. When I factor the 2 out of 2y squared, I'm left with y squared. When I factor out 2 from 10y, I'm left with 5y. And when I factor 2 out of negative 168, I'm left with negative 84. So the next thing we need to look at is, can y squared plus 5y minus 84 be factored further? So we know that 2 is a factor of the original polynomial that we started with, but can we factor this even further? So to look at that, now in front of y squared, we have a coefficient of 1. So now that a is equal to 1, we can factor the way we normally do. So I'm going to go ahead and set up the factors in the next step. And we're going to make a factor tree for c, which is now 84. So the first factors of 84 are 1 and 84, 2 and 42, 3 and 28, 4 and 21. I don't think 5 goes in. 6 and 14. So we're looking for factors of 84 that are going to add or subtract to get us 5, this b term in the middle. And so far, I don't see one. Let's keep going. 84 divided by 8. No. 7 and 12. All right, well, I can add or subtract 7 and 12 to get 5. So I'm going to go ahead and use 7 and 12. So in my factors, I'm going to fill out what I already know. So I know I'm going to use 7 and 12. And I also know that to get y squared, I'm going to use y times y. Then I just need to figure out my signs in between y and 7 and y and 12. So when I multiply, I want to end up with a negative 84. But when I add or subtract, I want to get a positive 5. So that tells me that I want the larger number to be positive and the smaller number to be negative, because positive 12 minus 7 will get us that positive 5 in the middle. And then, of course, to make sure that our factors are correct, we can always go through and multiply them. I'm not going to take the time to do that in my video today, but if you want to double check, feel free to do that. So we know that the factors of 2y squared plus 10y minus 168 are 2, y minus 7, and y plus 12. All right, let's move on to part B. So for part B, I would like you to pause this video and give factoring this a shot on your own. And when you're done, go ahead and press play and check your answer against mine. All right, so the first thing that you should have done is factored out a negative 5, which leaves you with x squared plus 2x minus, what's 120 divided by 5? 24. Awesome. Then we're going to make a factor tree for 24. 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. So do any of these factors add or subtract to get us that 2x in the middle? I can add or subtract 4 and 6 to get 2. So I'm going to use those in my factors. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my two sets of parentheses, leaving that -5 that we originally factored out in the middle, or out in front, sorry. So what times what will get us x squared? X times x, and then 4 times 6 will get us that 24, but we need a -24 when we multiply and a +2 when we add. So if we want to end up with a +2 when we add or subtract, we're going to make the larger number, or 6, positive, and then the smaller number, 4, negative, because 6 minus 4 is equal to 2. So hopefully that matches the answer that you ended up with as well. Moving on. So now in example 2, we're going to deal with problems where we need to factor when a is greater than 1, but this time we don't have a GCF. So for 4x squared minus 35x plus 49, 4, 35, and 49 do not have a greatest common factor, so there's nothing that we can factor out right away. So just as a reminder, I put the factor by grouping steps off to the side here, and that was a terrible line. Let me try that again. So as a reminder, I have the factor by grouping steps over here for us. And we're just going to follow them as we try to factor 4x squared minus 35x plus 49. So the very first thing that we want to do is multiply a times c. So in our case, a is 4 and c is 49. So we're going to take 4 times 49, which is 196. Then we need to make a factor tree for a times c and then choose factors that add or subtract to get b. So we need factors of 196 that will add or subtract to get us this -35. So the very first factor of 196, of course, is 1 times 196. It's even, so I know that 2 goes in. 2 times 98. Let's see if 3 goes in. Nope. 196 divided by 4. 4 and 49. 5 won't, so let's try 6. Nope. Or, just kidding, I typed in the wrong thing. 196 divided by 6. Nope. 196 divided by 7. 7 and 28. Ah! We might as well just stop there because I know if I add 7 to 28, I'll get 35. So that'll work. So now we're going to rewrite the bx term using the factors that you chose in step 2. So we're going to rewrite -35x using the 7 and the 28. So 4x squared, 7x, 28x, and 49. All right. So we know the 49 is positive. Let's put that plus sign back in. Now, if I want 7 and 28 to be combined to get -35, I need both of them to be negative. -7 minus 28 is -35. So now we have 4x squared minus 7x minus 28x plus 49. And we didn't actually change the problem because we can combine these two middle terms and get that -35x back. So we actually just expanded. We didn't actually change anything. So now step 4, add grouping symbols and a plus sign in between. We can't forget those plus signs in between. So we're going to add grouping symbols so that the first two terms are together and the second two terms are together. Now notice that negative in front of the 28x stays with the 28x inside the grouping symbols. And step 5, factor out the greatest common factors. So in 4x squared minus 7x, the GCF of these two terms is just x. So we're going to factor out that x. And we have 4x minus 7. And I know that's right because x times 4x is 4x squared, and x times -7 is 7x. Now looking at -28x plus 49, what have I always taught you to factor out first if your first term is negative? That negative sign. So we're going to factor out that negative, and then the GCF of 28 and 49 is 7. So we're going to factor out a -7 from both terms. So negative 28x, factoring out the negative 7, would have a positive 4x left. And then we need to be careful with the second term because it's a positive 49. I factor out a negative 7, which leaves a negative 7 behind. And I know that's right because negative 7 times 4x is negative 28x. Negative 7 times negative 7 is positive 49. All right. Now step 6, we can go ahead and write our factored form. And we know we're ready for step 6 because if you look at these two sets of parentheses, 4x minus 7 and 4x minus 7, they match. That tells me that I am ready to write my factors. What's in the parentheses that matches goes in the first factor. So 4x minus 7 is our first factor. And then what was left goes in the second factor. So this was what was in the parentheses, and then what was left goes in the second factor, the x and the negative 7. And again, we can always check our answer by multiplying it out, making sure we got the right answer. So why don't you go ahead and pause this video and give part B a shot. Try factoring by grouping on your own. And then when you're ready to check your answer, go ahead and press play, and you can compare your work to mine. All right, so the very first step is to take a times c. So in this case, a is 6 and c is also 6. 6 times 6 is 36. Then make a factor tree for 36. 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, and 6 and 6. Then you need to pick factors of 36 that add or subtract to give us that b term, that 37x. So I'm going to use 1 and 36. So I'm going to rewrite this using 1x and 36x. And then I need a positive 37 when I add, so I'm going to keep both of these guys positive. Now we're ready to add our grouping symbols, and what do we always want in between? The plus sign. So 6x squared and x are going to be grouped together, 36x and 6 are grouped together. Now factor out the GCFs. So 6x squared plus x has an x in common, so we're going to bring that out in front of the parentheses. And then we'll be left with 6x plus 1. And I know that's right because x times 6x is 6x squared, and x times 1 is x. So that checks out. And then 36x plus 6, what do these two terms have in common? A 6, so we're going to factor that out. What's left? Well, 6 times 6x would be 36x, and then 6 times 1 would be 6, so 6x plus 1. And then check it out. Our two sets of parentheses match. So that is going to be our first factor, 6x plus 1. And then what's left, the x and the positive 6 go in the second factor, x plus 6. And when we multiply that out, it should work correctly and match what we started with. So I know the factored form of 6x squared plus 37x plus 6 is 6x plus 1 times x plus 6. Now go ahead and do part C without me and pause the video and then come back when you're ready to check your answer. I'm going to give you a hint though. All of these terms are negative. So I would factor on a negative 1 as a GCF in your very first step, and then follow that by factor by grouping. All right, so let's check your work. So I factored out this negative. I'm going to have 6x squared plus 25x plus 25. If you notice, factoring out the negative really just switched all the signs to their opposite. So now A is 6. C is 25. 6 times 25 is 150. So let's make a factor tree for 150. We're looking for factors of 150 that will add or subtract to be 25x. So we have 2 and 75, 3 and 50. Does 4 go in? Nope. 5 does. 5 times 30. ooh, hey, I can get 25 by using 5 and 30, so let's give that a shot. Negative times 6x squared, 5x, 30x, and 25. Well, wait a second. I need a positive 25, and I need a positive 25x here. So I'm going to need a positive 30x and a negative 5x. And I think we're about to run into a little problem, because these two terms, when we group them, all they're going to have in common is an x, and we're still going to have this negative in the middle. But these guys, all they have in common is a 5, and they're going to have a positive left. So when we factor by grouping, our two sets of parentheses aren't actually going to match. So let's finish factoring, or making our factor tree for 150, and see if there's other factors of 150 that will work. And if not, then it might just be that we aren't able to factor this any further. So let's try, let's see, 150 divided by 6, 6 and 25. 50 divided by 7, nope. How about 8? Nope. 9. Ooh, how about 10 and 15? There we go. So let's try with 10 and 15. So I'm going to have 10x, 15x, and 25. Now this works out so much better because positive 10x and positive 15x will get us positive 25x. And so now when we factor by grouping, the signs in the middle of those two terms are going to match. So now we're going to go ahead and add our grouping symbols with a plus sign in between. 6x squared, I meant to change color here, 6x squared plus 10x, 15x plus 25. So these two terms have a 2x in common. Bring that out, and we're going to have 3x plus 5 plus, and then these two terms have a 5 in common, so we're going to bring that out. And we're going to end up with 3x plus 5. All right, so now these two sets of parentheses match. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my factors. So I know I have a negative as my first factor. Then I'm going to have two more factors after that. What's in the parentheses that matches goes in the first set of parentheses here. And then what's left goes in that last factor. So 2x plus 5 is left. Sorry, I didn't mean to write that in black. Let me change that to purple. 2x plus 5. There we go. And now we've completely factored negative 6x squared minus 25x minus 25.